everybody. My name is Dee Sandall, and I'm a volunteer with the Center of Addiction and Faith. I've been around ever since that first year when they started their conference, and it's been a powerful place to be and see all the changes that have occurred. Please visit our website and find all of the many, many opportunities that are there. I am a pastor and I am an alcoholic, and I've been sober since January 1st, 1974. And as your host, and with the Addiction and Faith, I'd like to open with a prayer, if we could. Let us pray. Lord God, be with us today. Open our hearts and minds to hear new directions, new insights. Somebody sharing their life that is so powerful. We ask you to guide our footsteps into whatever it is to influence our life, and to know that you are walking with us with courage and insight. We lift it up in your name, and we all say, Amen. Well, today we are going to hear from Christina Dent, and I was just telling her, I have gotten her book, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. And so I look forward to insight that she has to share today. I have foster parented, and it's not easy. And so I really praise her for all the work that she's done. And she's going to share that with us today. So thank you all for coming. And there will be question and answer time left at the end, maybe a little bit, Christine?
Yep.
Very good. So save your questions, write them down, and she'll be with you at the end. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Dee. And Katie for getting us online, getting all the technical stuff done, and the Center of Addiction and Faith for hosting this. This is really fun to be able to do. I hope is helpful and meaningful. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you as well. And so this is a 3-part series over these next 3 Tuesdays. And I thought maybe the most helpful way to paint the picture of how to spark curiosity in other people. All of you are here because your own curiosity has already been sparked, and many of you are already working in the space of helping people, of helping either helping people directly who might be struggling with substance use, or you are trying to draw other people from the community into gaining a vision for helping people in this space. And so what I wanted to do is today I'm going to pretend like you are somebody who has come to an End It for Good event, which is the organization that I work for, and it's how we do all of this work. Because our purpose is sparking curiosity in people who aren't yet curious about these ideas. We want to find people who don't realize there might be a whole world out there of information and knowledge that they don't know about related to substance use, and we want to help them be drawn into this and become curious and have their hearts and minds opened, and potentially change the way that they think, the way that they engage with the world and the people they love and the people around them. And so I want to share, so some of you might have already read my book, Curious. If you haven't, we want to give you a free copy of that. So you can email us at curious@enditforgood.com, and we'll send you a free copy of it. If you're an Audible listener, just let us know that, because we can send you a free Audible copy instead of a free physical copy. So let us know that. If you've already bought the book, you can email us anyway and get an extra copy to give away. And it can be your number one thing of how you help spark curiosity in somebody else. Give them a free copy of the book. So that is curious@enditforgood.com. And just let us know what kind of copy you want, physical or Audible, and where to send that. And we will love to send you a copy of that. So today I want to spend the first half of our time walking through, it's a little bit of my story, and it's how we think about the issue of drugs and addiction and the solutions that we see as an organization. So this would be the same presentation that we would give at a Rotary Club, at an event in a community in Mississippi where I live, anywhere where we might be in front of a group of people who maybe haven't even started thinking about these topics before. So I want to do that. And at the end of that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys to give your perspective and feedback. So you can give your feedback on the ideas. You can ask questions if you want to, but it is a feedback time. That's how we also do things at events that we host. We take some of the time for ourselves and we use the majority of the time in those. Typically, if we're hosting an event, they're 2 hours long. We spend 30 minutes on a presentation and almost all the rest of the time on audience feedback and question asking. It's really, really powerful to give other people a chance to engage. It helps them think through their own questions of what they've just heard and to process those ideas that they've just been exposed to. So we'll do that. And then next week, there will be a different presentation, but similar in style to this one. And that presentation will take you into the behind the scenes of what you're going to see today. What are the ideas and the thought process and the values that create the kinds of presentations that we do for people who aren't yet engaged in these issues? What have we found that works at helping people become interested instead of just saying, I'm not interested, and, pushing the ideas away? So we have hosted about 50 events, and the vast majority of those, we're getting that hour and a half of feedback while one of our team members is furiously typing on their laptop to take down people's thoughts and questions and what they liked, what they thought didn't make sense. And we've used all of that feedback to then inform how we build the presentation for the next time. And so we want to give you that sort of behind the scenes look of these are the ways that we think about the process people go through to become curious about something, to change their minds about something, and then be able to offer that to you. We'll discuss those things as well next week. And then that third week, the last week of our discussion, we'll dive more into Curious. Hopefully you'll have had a chance to read it by that point. Your copy will be there. It's not a long book. It's very short chapters. I like reinforcements like that where I only have to read 15 minutes and I've already read a whole chapter. It makes me feel very accomplished. So I gave myself word counts for each chapter because I love reading books with short chapters in it. So that's how we're going to spend these next 3 weeks. And so this is more, I'm going to share my screen in a second so you can see all the presentation slides that we use for this as well. And so you can be writing down notes or questions. You can stick them in the chat box if you want to not forget them that way. And then after this, it takes 20, 25 minutes or so, and then I'll turn it over to you guys and we'll just go around. I'll just call on the names as I see them across my screen, and you can pass if you don't have anything you want to share or say, or you can give your feedback and thoughts and questions as well. So I'm really excited all of you are here. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us here. It's fantastic. All right, let me see if I can get this. Are you now seeing how to spark curiosity? Perfect. All right. So just another note. Let me get my thing going. There we go. I know a few people hopped on late. If you want a free copy of the book, email us at curious@enditforgood.com. We'll send you a free physical copy or a free audio copy. Just let us know what kinds you want. So when we talk about the issue of drugs and addiction, we're talking about a huge issue. You can't cover it all in one conversation or one evening or a week or a month. It's huge. So we're just going to take a little walk around the tip of this iceberg and recognize that it's a really big and really complex issue. But even with that, most people agree that we need to change course in some way. We might not agree on what change needs to happen, but almost everyone agrees we are not getting the kinds of outcomes that we want related to drugs and addiction. So my story of change began fairly recently, but my life journey began in Mississippi, where I still live today. I'm a born and raised Mississippian, been here my whole life, never had any interest in drug use. So didn't have friends that were using in high school. I didn't even drink alcohol in high school. It just was not part of my world. So when I heard Just Say No, I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 83. And so it was like, well, that's fine. I don't have any interest anyway. I went to college. I have a degree in Bible. and didn't have any interest in drug use there either. So really my story is not one of this radically changed lifestyle, but of a radically changed mind. So if I had to summarize how I thought about drugs growing up, I would have said drugs are bad and drug use is bad and outlawing drugs is clearly the right thing to do. It just makes sense. It makes so much sense you don't even have to think about it. It's just obvious. And I carried that through my childhood. Now, nobody ever expressly told me that. I just picked it up from the culture around me. I grew up in a wonderful Christian home, a conservative home, still have many of those values today. And I didn't have any other way of thinking about it other than that. That was very much I guess the value system of the broader conservative culture that I grew up in. And so my husband and I became foster parents when I was in my early 30s. And when we were in foster parent training, they didn't teach you anything about addiction, even though most children in foster care are there for some sort of drug-related purpose. There was no training on that at all. So I carried those same ideas with me into being a foster parent. And our second placement was when I met a woman named Joanne. And she had struggled with addiction for many years by the time that I met her. She had started using in her teens, and she was pregnant with her first child. We were just about the same age. And so her son was born, and she had not been able to beat her addiction during her pregnancy. And so her son was removed from her custody, and he was put in foster care, and he was brought to our house, and we became Beckham's foster parents. And so he's this adorable, precious little tiny preemie baby. And a few days after he comes to our house, we go and take him to his first visit with her at the local child welfare office. And I pull into the parking lot. I have my other kids with me, pop his car seat out of the van, turn around to go walk in. And there, coming across the parking lot, is this woman running to meet us. And she's crying. And she runs over to him and just starts kissing him, talking to him. She doesn't even acknowledge that I'm there. She is just looking at her son and enjoying being with him. This is Joanne, his mom. And I didn't have any way to understand that at all. In my mind, if you were kind of the cultural narrative I grew up with is bad people use drugs. So if you are using drugs while you're pregnant, that was kind of another level of you not caring about your kids. And so I couldn't put together what I was seeing with what I had grown up believing. They didn't go together. This couldn't be true, what I'm seeing, Joanne, this outpouring of love for her son. And so I felt suspicious about that. But she spent her 1 hour of visitation time with Beckham. And then I came back to pick him up and bring him back to our house. And we'll always remember this mental image of walking into that visitation room and her sitting in the corner of that couch with him sleeping on her shoulder. And she's just sitting there with her eyes closed, not scrolling on her phone, she's just enjoying this 1 hour she gets with him. She leaves for inpatient drug treatment. Beckham comes home with us. And I agree that she can call me every day to get an update on him. So she would call and ask me to tell her anything I could think of to tell her about the boring life of a newborn. And then she would ask me to put her on speakerphone, and she would sing to him over the phone. And so for me, this is simultaneously this incredible experience. It just feels like holy ground to be there for this. But it conflicts with everything that I have thought about people like Joanne, people who are using, moms who weren't able to stay sober during the pregnancy. And so one of those things has to be false. Either I've misunderstood what's really going on with Joanne, or this display of affection isn't true. Both of those can't be true at the same time. And so, nobody likes to have the way they think challenged, me included. And so that initial desire was to say, this isn't true. Her love isn't this real. She's just trying to get me to put in a good word with a social worker, et cetera. But the more that I got to know Joanne, the more I could see this is absolutely real and true. And this is who she is. She is a mom like me. She loves her son just as much as I love my sons, which means there's something else going on here with her addiction. This is not a lack of love for her son. This isn't a lack of wanting to be free from it. This isn't a lack of wanting to have a different life than the one that she has had for the last 20 years. That was really hard to just acknowledge that reality, because it meant I had to start rethinking these other pieces of what I had understood addiction to be and the way I thought about people who were struggling with addiction. And so to Joanne's immense credit, she is the hero of this story. She let me in. She is the one who let me see who she really is. She could have held me at arm's length and I could have kept going with the way I had always thought about the world, and she didn't. She let me in and she let me see who she really is, which is who people struggling with addiction really are. They're just people who are hurting, people who are struggling, people who want different things than what they're choosing right now. And yet the path out of it is incredibly difficult. And so that was, it pushed on these ideas that I had, because I could immediately see that putting Joanne in jail is not going to solve an addiction. I knew that people could get drugs just as easily in jails as they can in the free world. I could see that leaving Beckham without a mother who clearly loves him and wants to be there for him is going to be very negative also. And so for the first time, I started questioning, is the criminal justice system the right tool to address this issue? Certainly it needs to be addressed. This is a serious issue. Joanne would even say today she was not capable of parenting her son in a healthy way in the middle of that addiction. She needed to find a path of recovery to be able to parent him. So we need to address addiction, but is the criminal justice system the right tool for that? So then I started learning. And part of that learning journey was trying to zoom way out and see, what have we been doing with addiction and drugs more broadly? And has it actually worked? And are there things that could work better? So when we think about drug use, we need to acknowledge that people have been changing the way they feel for thousands of years. Turns out you can ferment an awful lot of things, and humans have been figuring out how to do that for a really long time. For most of human history, it was dealt with as a health issue, a spiritual issue, but never something that you would have used whatever the equivalent of their criminal justice system for. Even when we think about opium, Thomas Jefferson grew opium poppies at Monticello. He was a daily user of laudanum, which is a concoction of alcohol and opium. And so even in our own more recent history, we have a long history where opium was not seen as this demonized sort of thing, but it was treated as, it's a health thing. But then something shifts. So we have thousands of years of human history where we treat substance use that way. And then we shift. About 150 years ago, the shift starts to take place. We institutionalize people who are struggling with addiction. Then we begin incarcerating people who are struggling with addiction. So that's happening on the consumer side. On the market side, we start banning different drugs. If we perceive that they have some potential for misuse, we start criminalizing them. We just try to keep them out of the market altogether. But what we've seen is that there are increasing rates of illegal drug use. That has doubled in the last 20 years, illegal drug use, increasing rates of overdose, increasing rates of harm. So why is it that this approach has not produced the kinds of outcomes that we wanted? For me, that answer came in realizing the difference between harm from substances and harms that come from criminalizing or prohibiting those substances or criminalizing consumers. So we all are aware that drugs can harm you. That first category of harm is well known. What we're less familiar with is what harm we might be blaming on the drugs that's actually a result of the policies that we have chosen around drugs. So that's what I'm going to dive into a little more, because we tend to be less familiar with that. So for any substance, for any product, you have kind of three components. You've got a market, a substance or product that's changing hands, and then a consumer who's buying it. So who's producing it and selling it, who's buying it, and what's the thing that's actually changing hands. That's true if you're talking about, tomatoes or a technology product or heroin. That's how markets operate. So when you criminalize or prohibit a market for a popular substance, it does not go away. It moves underground. So we saw this in the 1920s with alcohol. We had legal regulated businesses that sold alcohol. We prohibited it, and it immediately moved underground. Now we've got, Al Capone, he's making bank, millions of dollars, while legal law-abiding businesses have shut their doors. So we ended that by re-legalizing alcohol, but we have continued that same level of harm, of crime and violence, by prohibiting other popular drugs. They don't go away, but they do go underground. And it hands over this massive economy of money into the hands of gangs, cartels, terrorist organizations, who are all primarily funded through the revenues they get from the underground drug market. So when you criminalize a market, you get a lot more crime and violence, because it shifts underground and completely out of regulation and control into the criminal underground. When you criminalize a substance, it immediately becomes contaminated, because you have no quality control anymore, and it becomes higher potency. So we saw that during alcohol prohibition. People started cooking up whatever they wanted to in the woods behind their house, or wherever they wanted to make their bootleg alcohol. So we saw this lack of quality control. People didn't know what it was that they were drinking out of this bottle that they were buying. And we saw that it got more potent. During alcohol prohibition, you basically couldn't get beer and wine, which were the most popular alcoholic drinks, just like they are today, because nobody wanted to take the risk of smuggling something that was low potency. So when you prohibit something, you want the biggest punch in the smallest package. And that same thing happens today at sports stadiums, where you can't drink on the inside. When people tailgate, they primarily drink beer. It's 5% alcohol by volume. When they go inside and can't take legal alcohol inside, they start drinking 45% alcohol by volume. They drink hard liquor. Not because their tastes have changed, but because prohibition started. And who's going to smuggle in a 6-pack of beer when they could just smuggle in a flask of whiskey? You could get the same amount of intoxication with a lot less risk of getting caught. So prohibited markets always push towards more and more potent substances. And the same thing is true of other drugs that are still prohibited today. We went from having legal, regulated products on the shelves, including drugs like heroin and cocaine 100 years ago were still legal. We've pushed those out of legal regulated markets and into the complete free-for-all of the underground market, where they are contaminated, and we see this march towards higher and higher potency, which is why we have the fentanyl crisis. You can smuggle, a boatload of heroin, or you can smuggle a suitcase of fentanyl. Which one are you going to do? If you're trying not to be detected and to make the most amount of profit, you're going to smuggle the biggest punch in the smallest package, which is where this push for putting fentanyl into the underground drug market came from. So when you look at how many people now are dying from fentanyl-involved overdose, it's about 90% of people who die from an opioid overdose. So a lot of the pushback on opioids has come to pharmaceutical companies, to big pharma, but the death problem is an underground market problem. The fentanyl crisis, the overdose crisis, is not a prescription crisis. It's a crisis of people not being able to access regulated legal substances, and instead they're using the contaminated mishmash on the street and not able to dose it appropriately. So we have criminalized markets that increase crime and violence, prohibited substances, increase potency, and they remove all quality control. And then what happens when you criminalize consumers, which is Joanne. That's what got me interested in this, is the consumer piece. What most of us, I think, don't recognize is that during alcohol prohibition, people were never arrested for drinking alcohol. Alcohol use was not illegal, only selling it. So even though we culturally have this idea that alcohol prohibition didn't work and we rolled that back, even during that period when alcohol was prohibited, we weren't rounding up all the people who were drinking alcohol and putting them in jail. We were only putting in jail the people who were selling it. But we have extended this criminal justice response to people who consume other types of drugs. So we went from treating people throughout most of history as just people who didn't need an intervention if there was no problem with their substance use. But if there was a problem, if you had a heroin addiction 100 years ago, you could be treated by your doctor for that. They could prescribe you regulated, legal, medical grade heroin if they felt like that would help stabilize you, so they could deal with the underlying issues of what was driving that addiction. But we have now shifted primarily to a criminal justice response to substance use. And what that does is it takes what we still have to deal with anyway, which is drug use. We know from the history of the world, there will always be people who want to change the way that they feel. Some of those people are going to do that through substance use. But when we introduce incarceration, we introduce disconnection from family, employment, housing, all positive things in a person's life that we know can help people overcome addiction. They come out of that often with a criminal record. That's going to make regaining employment and housing and rebuilding their lives very difficult. And that whole cycle is very traumatic. And now we know with no uncertainty that trauma increases the risk of addiction. So we're using a tool that is intended to produce trauma in a person's life to try to solve a problem that's made worse by trauma. And that, I think, is the crux of why it has not worked. We continue to try to use pain to try to solve a problem that's ultimately driven by pain of many different sorts. Now, that cycle, for people who live that cycle, is painful for anyone that experiences that. But for different communities, the number of people who experience that is different. So if you take something like marijuana, African-American people and white people use and sell marijuana at similar rates. But if you're African-American, you're 4 times more likely to be arrested for it. So it's the use and selling percentages are similar kind of per capita, but the enforcement is different. And so that translates into whole communities who experience a very different level of harm because of the number of individuals who are impacted by that. And so you get this community impact that's very different. And so I just wanted to highlight that as well. It's the harm harms everyone that it touches, no matter what, if they experience that in a traumatic way. And yet some communities have paid a much greater price for that. An interesting thing that has come on my radar just recently, this is a new incorporation of a slide into this, because I think it's really interesting in this conversation around whether or not incarceration can stop someone from using drugs, like if that helps people to stop that behavior because they don't want to experience it again, is that incarceration does not impact people's choice of whether or not to commit a crime again any more than if they were put on probation and not incarcerated. So the whole hope is that by arresting someone and putting them in jail, it will change their behavior. They won't be arrested again because they won't be using again. And there's been over 100 studies that have been done, and they have found that it's just not the case. It's not just not the case with drugs. It's just not the case with incarceration. It doesn't change rates of recidivism any more than putting somebody on probation does. It can remove them from the community if they are, a hazard, a public safety hazard, or have done something where the community can't be safe with them not being incarcerated. But it doesn't change future behavior any more than if they had just been put on probation. But incarceration does make you 12 times more likely to die from an overdose after being released from incarceration. So there are certainly people who have had the experience of being arrested. It was a wake-up call for them. They stopped using, they found a path to recovery, and they would say, being arrested saved my life. I'm not taking away from that at all. People can find recovery in lots of different ways. If that worked for the majority of people, we would see a very different level of outcomes right now. We wouldn't have the incarceration rates we do. We wouldn't have law enforcement who say one of their chief frustrations is that they arrest the same people over and over again, and it doesn't solve their problems. So we have to think about always the other side of the coin. So yes, there are some people for whom jail was a positive experience, and there are some people who died because they were arrested and incarcerated. So it might have saved some lives. It has also cost others. That's a significant reality to weigh. Are we willing to cost lives in order to help some people find recovery in that particular way? So if these solutions have not produced what we want them to, what are some options for changing the way that we approach drugs and addiction? It's helpful to look at how we have approached two of the most harmful, most deadly, most addictive drugs on the planet, which are currently legal, and that would be, tobacco and alcohol. So when we realized that people were dying from smoking cigarettes, we did not ban cigarettes. We started a massive public health education campaign to discourage people from it, but we didn't force them. We didn't arrest them. We didn't push the market for cigarettes underground. So we started with warnings on packages of cigarettes. We came up with different kinds of aids to help people move off of much more harmful combustible cigarettes and onto e-cigarettes or other gum, things like that. And we gave people opportunities. Hey, if you want to quit, there's, call this quit line. There is help for you. We've done the similar thing with alcohol. We put age restrictions around it. We have laws against drinking and driving. So you can't just go put the rest of the community at risk just because you want to make a personal decision. So you can make the personal decision to drink alcohol, but as soon as that decision spills over into the community through intoxicated driving, that's a criminal action that is punishable by arrest. That's the kind of distinction that we need to start thinking about for other kinds of drug use, that we already know how to do this with other types of substances, where we allow people to make personal choices and we protect the community from the impact of those choices. We have different kinds of regulation for alcohol. You can go and drink alcohol at a bar, but you can't just take open alcohol with you when you leave. We have, you think about something like pseudoephedrine here in Mississippi. You can get it at a pharmacy. You have to present your driver's license. You don't need a prescription, but you can't just go buy however much you want of it, because we know that people can use that to make other drugs. So we have these different regulation models operating all around us. And what regulation gives us is a way to have quality control. We know what the ingredients are. We know the potency and purity of it. When you go to the liquor store and buy alcohol, you know whether or not, you're going to drink 6 ounces and be completely under the table, or whether it's something really low potency and you can handle that. All of that is out the window once you prohibit something. You don't have any idea how to dose it appropriately. You don't know if you're getting something that's really potent or something that's been cut 1,000 times and is really weak. So how could we use these kinds of principles to reduce harm from other drugs? So when we think back to those three categories of market, substance, and consumer, we can reduce that consumer harm through decriminalization of drug possession. So that's not addressing the market or the contamination, but it would just say, we're not going to arrest people like Joanne because they're in possession of a drug. As long as they're not breaking other laws, that's not going to be an arrestable offense just because they're in possession of a drug. But for me, I wanted to keep pushing that to say, well, I don't want the crime and violence from the underground market either, and I don't want contamination because that's what so many people are dying from today. And the only way to really make significant gains on those two fronts is through legally regulating these markets again, bringing them back into regulation, which allows us then to have control over ingredients, potency, and purity, things like that. And it gives us an exit to this cycle of harm where we still have drug use, but now we focus on saving lives. We focus on stabilizing lives. We focus on connecting people to healthcare when they're ready for that, connecting them to community and purpose in their lives, helping them rebuild their life, and all of it focused towards how can we keep them alive and help them take that next step when they're ready to do that, instead of introducing more and more pain and suffering into their lives. That doesn't mean there's no accountability. We don't want to swing from one side really far to the other side and say, okay, we've locked everybody up. Now we're not going to lock anybody up no matter what they do. And there, I think, is a very real warning for us there, that it's important to find that middle ground. It would not be appropriate for us to say, hey, because alcohol is legal, you can just sort of do whatever you want and it doesn't matter. So if you get drunk and you hit someone or whatever, like, well, I mean, you were drunk and that was legal to get drunk, and so we're just going to let you go free. We would say that's crazy. No, that's assault. You can't assault someone, whether you're high or drunk or sober, without being held accountable for the assault. That's really important. Or theft or whatever it might be, where you are hurting someone else, that you still need accountability for that to have a functioning, healthy society. So you can have accountability for related crimes and also reduce harm from drug use. It's not a perfect solution. It is what we see as a more realistic solution that allows people like Joanne, who today has been sober for 8 years. That's not always the story. Many people, I met somebody a couple of weeks ago, had been to treatment 19 times before he finally found a path to recovery. But it can only happen that way for her because she's not sitting in prison while Beckham is growing up without her. Many others are. That is their story, not because they're different from Joanne, just because they happened to get caught and she didn't. So people like Joanne changed my heart, but it was the research and evidence that really changed my mind about the best path forward and the solutions that might actually solve some of the problems that we're facing. I think we spend a lot of our time picking up the pieces of the harm that's happening all around us. And what we hope is that we can take a step back and start to implement solutions that would help us to stop those lives from being broken in the first place. And now I'm going to turn it over to you guys and get your thoughts on these ideas that I have just sent over to you. So I'm going to reorganize my screen real quick so that I can see you. And then I'm going to go down my screen and just sort of like call on people and just take about 1 minute. We've got 20 minutes till the end, and this is all we're going to do is just be able to hear people's thoughts. And so if you're someone who tends to talk more, I'll help you wrap up if you're going on too long, because I want everybody to be able to have a chance to talk. So try to just take a minute or two and share your thoughts. Karen, you are first on my screen. So you want to give us your thoughts, and you can tell us, who you are, what do you think about the ideas, biggest lingering question. You don't have to answer those. You can, whatever you want to use your time for is great.
Yeah, sure. Hi. Yeah, thanks. No, that was really wonderfully presented. Thank you. Because I did read, I just finished the book about a month ago, Chasing the Scream, Johan Hari, about the war on drugs. And this really, I just loved it. Thank you. So anyway, I have 4 years of sobriety recently, so May 25th. And I am now a transformational coach that I specialize in recovery and addiction. So this is definitely interesting to me, and it does open up the mind. I just went to a meeting though on this note with the a drug alliance the next town over, and the high schools around here still it's like telling the kids just say no, and it's really to me it that is a lack of education, a lack of understanding about the real issue. It's not the drugs. Like now that I'm sober and I have a healthy sobriety, emotionally, spiritually, I could be in like surrounded by alcohol. It's not that. It was always me and my issues, and my I had to do my own work to get to recover mentally. So like when I hear the drug line still is like vilifying drugs, I'm like, yeah, but that's like saying to the kids, don't look at the sky. Don't like, like it's there. It's always going to be there. And it's just not working. So I'm glad to see that you have this presentation and you've written on it and you have an organization, because I really am beginning to understand that we have it upside down, how we're treating it. And I did read the history, and it is interesting that it really I don't know. Like it's so clear to see the Al Capone and the alcoholism thing and how it didn't work, but it's like it's not working for drugs. It's just so many people are dying, and what are we doing? And since I've been sober, I've lost almost like 15. I think it's around 15 people now, and most of them are fentanyl overdose death. And I'm like, and I know they wanted to live, like it's like such a sin. My
Mm,
one friend that died, she left behind a 6-year-old daughter. And it's like, what the heck are we doing? So
yeah.
education and speaking about this and writing about it, no, I really admire it. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Linda, you were next.
Yes. Yes. Hi there. Great topic. I'm a family therapist and clinical supervisor for the Alcoholism Center for Women in Echo Park, California. And the majority of the people that we serve, the women that we serve, are women who are transitioning out of jail on the street. A huge part of them have open DCFS cases. They have children in foster care. The system is totally broken. I mean, and in LA, we have a tidal wave of need and a handful of support. So, yeah, our way is not working. The system's not working. The court system's not working. Um, and we have these multi-generational families that are being further traumatized, you know? So it's kind of like
Keep
you
it
see the
going.
mother,
Yeah.
you see the grandmother, guess what? These kids that are in foster care right now, they're going to be the next batch addicted, and I think too, I used to do before COVID a family group where clients could bring their family members to education where I would talk about multi-generational trauma, multi-generational addiction, all those types of things. And it is true. I mean, 90% of the women that we serve have multi-generational trauma, whether it's gang activity, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's just being extremely poor. Um, and, so to me, and two, I'm a therapist, getting down to the how did I get to be, and the addiction isn't the bullseye on the issue. It's just a symptom of the bigger picture, which really is the multi-generational trauma and the you know, the family issues, your own personal trauma. And we're not really addressing it, And even so, I mean, most people that go to treatment, this many keep their sobriety, And
Yep.
so we really try to help them get an outside support system while they're in treatment, because we don't want you to leave and then all of a sudden, okay, now what do I do?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody. Nobody's helping me. So, it's a crapshoot, really, but yeah. And two, the women that I work with, I mean, and I've been working here for like 9 years. All of them are such hard workers and they have such a big heart, and they're the ones rowing the boat for anyone and everyone, and oh yeah, I have needs too, but and that's okay. You're not going to fulfill them anyhow. So I'm just going to keep rowing, and my treat, my reward, and my, zone out is my substance.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, I love
Thank you
what
for
you're
that
doing.
work. That is,
It's needed.
it's so needed and so important, and there's no way around.
Yeah.
People who are going to need that, even if we do everything correctly, hopefully there's fewer people who would need that. But I know that takes a lot out of you and all the people who work with you also. So thank you for that work. Diane?
Hi, I'm Diane Warvick, and I'm a nurse practitioner who runs a care ministries at our church. And we have a mental health and addiction ministry. And we also have a collaborative of 36 faith communities that are working together. And certainly addiction has become a big issue, and we do a lot with education. We have a navigator system who will help people find some of the needed help they're looking for, trying to stay aware of groups and things that are around to help in that recovery process. So it's been an issue that we're all dealing with. Personally, I have a grandson who's been through this, and watching what, the one thing that they said to him one time, he was having a hard time. Well, we could lock him up and put him in jail, and his family, we said, no, that's not going to answer any questions. And so finding him help in treatment centers, he's been through 3 and now is sober for a little over a year and a half, and really wanting to reach out and help others through this too. So I think this is a very timely topic. And, the bigger question is how do you get it out to everybody? So to realize that these are folks who are caring and loving, and they just happen to be messed up with these drugs and alcohol, and how do we spend time with them and in the education? So we do a lot with education.
Where are you located?
Minneapolis.
Okay. Fantastic. Love to hear that you've got a church ministry for that. That's so great.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope more and more of that happens.
Well, there
Fred?
are 36 faith communities that have wanted to join us, and we get asked very often for joining the membership. So
love it. That's awesome. Fred Coulter?
Yes, Fred Coulter, and I'm in Defiance, Ohio, and retired United Church of Christ minister, and decided in my retirement to become involved with the recovery community and mental health community. Both those are in my family, and myself, I'm in recovery for a number of years, and just thought I'd focus on that. Through my denomination in Ohio, we had a book club where I just finished up last month reading This is Ohio, and the title there too, same thing about what's happening in Ohio, the overdose crisis in the front lines of a new America by Jack Schuler. And he actually came, and we got to talk to him about it and what's going on. So I just am curious, want to get there, but so much of my upbringing was same messages that you received, Christina. So I'm unlearning in order to relearn, and that's why I'm here today. So thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, I should say too, I give this like 25-minute version. This was like a year and a half for me of like, oh, what about this? What about that? Like the wrestling process and all of that. It's and we may not end up at the same places, which is totally fine too. But just trying to learn about anything that's different than what we have thought previously is a long, hard process. So love that you're leaning into that. Curtis?
Hi, everybody. Curtis Hanna. I'm located in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm a verger at my local Episcopalian church, St. Matthew's, and I've been involved in drug policy reform for about 15 years. I helped with the push to legalize medical cannabis and then adult use cannabis in Minnesota. And I'm interested in continuing the work to try to further decriminalize possession and use of drugs in the state. And just very much appreciate the education that you're providing. And yeah, looking forward to finding more allies. Thanks.
Fantastic. All right, Quinn?
Yeah, I was wondering, Christina, when Joanne was taking the substance or whatever during pregnancy, what happened? Did it show up in the child? Or,
As in like negative outcomes?
Yeah, what happened with the child?
Yeah, he is amazing. He is an incredibly talented drummer. He drums with like blues festivals here. He's 8 years old. And he's amazing. So I asked, because we fostered several children who were exposed to drugs in utero. And I asked the pediatrician about that and said, how do we help, undo any of that? Or, what can we do? And he said, look, you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to figure out what could or could not have been caused by whatever they might have been. He said, there are children who are exposed in utero and are untouched by it. There's no negative impact. There are children who aren't exposed at all in utero and have significant learning delays. So he said, there's just he just encouraged me to look less at that and more at how can we help women be healthy during their pregnancy? How can we help children be healthy after they're born? But to try to, which I found really helpful, instead of just because, there's always a part of you that's like, well, what about this or that? And so really just focusing on how can we open the door wide for women to come forward for help during their pregnancy, instead of making them more afraid, holding an arrest over their head, being charged with, felony child abuse because they were using during pregnancy. All that does is push women away from healthcare, away from telling their doctor the truth, which is the opposite of what we need if we want their kids to be healthy. We want them to be in great prenatal care and getting all the help that they can get. That's a great question.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Let's see, Louise. Your mute is on. Your video is on now, but your mute is still on.
Thank you for being at our Addiction Faith conference last year. And yes, I totally agree with what you were trying to do. And I am taking a class right now that Keaton is teaching about being spiritual companions. And I'm just want to hear, I just like what you're doing and I want to hear more. That's why I'm here. I have no questions.
Thanks for being here. Marie?
I'm Marie Preftasarens, from the Everett area of Washington State, which is just about 45 minutes north of Seattle. And I am a mental health counselor, and I was working with DCYF, which is Division of Children, Youth, and Families, so child welfare. So so similar to your story, I had a Joanne that I worked with, and I was probably doing the work with parents that had had their children removed from them for probably about 2 years. And since addiction wasn't part of my story, I never could wrap my brain around why women would use drugs and drink alcohol during their pregnancies. But I never really like voiced it because, I was, working with the parents that were now in recovery, trying to get their children back into their care. But I had my Joanne that I was able to like ask questions to. She was just so open, and she was willing to entertain these questions that I had. And I remember asking her point blank, why would you use, when you were pregnant? Because her clean date was the day after her daughter's birth, because she used on the day her daughter was born. So I remember her celebrating her first birthday in recovery the day after Gabby's first birthday. So anyway, I asked her that, and she said, because I didn't know how to stop using. Like, no one told me I could. Like, I was just so afraid to stop using. And then I was afraid to get prenatal care because of what the consequences could be, so she just kept using through her whole pregnancy. So that led me to want to learn more about substance use disorder. So I enrolled in our local college in their substance use disorder counselor program. And then I was able to earn my, so I'm a duly licensed mental health counselor and substance use disorder professional. And then for 2 years, I ran an inpatient program. So I love everything that you said, because it totally aligns with what I've learned and what I believe. My lingering question, and this is probably the hardest one to answer, is to get that systemic collaboration that's so important. Because I know here in Washington, we went through like a major overhaul through the legislation of arresting people in addiction, because the state follows the disease model. So you don't arrest somebody because they have cancer, So if the crimes were considered misdemeanors, individuals in addiction were not being arrested, but they were encouraged to seek treatment. The problem was the legislation never gave like facilities like mine more money.
Yeah.
So, as a matter of fact, my agency operated several inpatient programs, and the biggest one was 144 beds. Yeah. We shut that program down completely. So, during the same time, and
well, we'll dive into that more. I've got your question down for the next time for us to dive into that systemic collaboration. That's a great, it's a big question. All right, we got a few people left here, and then we're bumping up on time. Shauna.
Okay, you hear me fine?
Yep.
So I'm a talker, but today I kind of feel at a loss for words. I'll just say a little bit about myself. I live in Northern Ontario, Canada. We, as many places I'm hearing, certainly have a crisis here. And it's not just the drug problem, it's tied with our social homelessness, mental health issues. It's a big problem. I currently am on a hiatus, but for the last couple of years, I've been doing with my church. We started a ministry that I was doing within the church, where I was doing Hair for the Homeless. So our church reaches out. We have a pretty good presence with homelessness and feeding and offering clothes and support. And we're always looking for ways, to change that language and make a difference. And so I not even sure how this came across my plate, but I know it was meant to come across my plate. Very interested in what you have to say. And the question I would have would be one of, what is the actual starting point? I know over coffee in the morning, my husband and I have many discussions over what the reality is and where change needs to be made. But often it stops there. It's finding the right people and educating, I don't know how to say it properly. I think there's lots of caring people that want to help. They don't know how to help. So it's, trying to get that community first educated with the right language to actually bring about change. So I'm very interested in hearing everything that comes my way so that I can use that and take it back and maybe now put something into action.
Thanks, Shauna. Robert.
Okay, hi. Robert Legg from Culpeper, Virginia. I write a newsletter on drug policy for the last 3 years. One of the things I thought that would be helpful is if the idea is that we're supposed to try to get people curious, is maybe you could make some suggestions on what are some good questions to start, because I always find that asking questions is more helpful than just telling somebody something. And but of course, you want to not ask leading questions, but you want to be able to have follow-up questions that go in the direction that you'd like to go.
Great question. I got that down for our next discussion. Awesome. Sydney?
Hey, y'all. Robert, I just want to say the fact that you're from Culpeper, I lived in Culpeper. It's just kind of ironic. The only two places were Mississippi and Culpeper that I ever lived besides Texas. But I got my hands full here. But yeah, I love End It for Good. I got the chance to intern for him last fall. And then I guess I was going to add that I have a similar story to Joanne's with my older one, who is, you might have seen popping around. But yeah, I don't know what else to add here. I love all the work that Christina does. So, and hopefully I'll see y'all next time, I guess.
Awesome.
Now
Thanks,
you get
Sydney.
still.
Judith, I'm not sure if you were on earlier or not, but I think you're the only person who's on right now that I haven't called on yet. Did you have thoughts, questions?
Well, I came in towards the end. I was just very curious because it's a similar story. I've been the addict, the one caught in the system. My son's now caught in the system, and I'm raising his kids. So I'm very curious on this, and I will join earlier next week.
Awesome. We're glad to have you. Next week we'll cover how to help more people become curious and give you some good questions too. That's a great thought Robert had. So I'm going to turn it back over to Katie to close us out, and look forward to seeing you guys next week for some more ideas and more discussion. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Christina, and thank you all for being here and making this all possible. I just shared a link in the chat. If you are able to support today and help keep these sessions going, we gratefully welcome that. And if you have not yet signed up to be kept in the loop of events like these, we encourage you to do that at addictionandfaith.com. And we also have a mobile app, which is free in the App Store. And we do want to just share a couple save the dates coming up. Our annual conference this year will be virtual, October 17th through 19th, and we'll be announcing registration details soon, but wanted to flag you on that. And we'll be sharing some more details about our July sessions and August sessions coming up as well. So make sure you're signed up on our mailing list so you don't miss awesome sessions like these. And thank you again for being here. And thank you, Christina, again for such a wonderful presentation. And we're looking forward to next week's session.
Thanks, Katie. And I just stuck my email address in the chat also. Love to connect with people outside of this too. So keep the conversation going. That's how movements happen. You collaborate, you meet people, and that's how the world changes.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Thanks. See everyone next week.
Bye-bye.